Hey guys, this is QXC. This game I'm going to be taking a look is on God's Garden. This is me, Root QXC, is the purple Terran in the top left-hand corner, versus Azz, the blue Protoss, spawning in the bottom left-hand corner. So mostly what I'm going to be talking about in this game is the importance of attacking while defending. And basically what this will look like in this game is I'm going to be on the defensive. He's going to be extremely aggressive, attacking, applying pressure. And my odds of winning by simply defending would have been fairly slim, but by using, or at least less, by using counterattacks in the form of Banshees, I'm able to draw some of his forces away from his attack so that I can successfully defend and go on to win the game. So the map is God's Garden. This is an old Brood War map. If you're not familiar with it, it's not a standard map in StarCraft 2. So the way it looks is you have obviously your main right here. Then you have an expansion that's inside your main. There's a cliff next to that on which people can drop, and you can use Reapers to jump up into the main. And you also have an expansion in the front of your base. So it's similar to Delta Quadrant in that you have 3 bases, very accessible, but there are no rocks on this map. So very common kind of builds on this map, early fast expansions inside the main, sometimes even expansions before barracks or gateway, although that was more of a Brood War thing. We haven't seen this map enough in StarCraft 2 to see what's really viable and what really makes the most amount of sense. So here you see I'm going for a very standard opening, 12 racks, 13 gas. And Azz going for a similar, just standard, chrono boosting out a lot of probes, getting his economy up and running. Pretty standard timing. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit here so we can get to the actual meat of the video. I'm not really going to be focusing much on the build order. So you can see here I'm checking out my main with my SCV to see where the probe is, and I'm just kind of holding, building some Marines and starting to attack to factory. So one thing that's really important is after a probe leaves your base, scout around everywhere, make sure there's no hidden pylon. It's a really easy way to lose to a big all-in kind of play. So you really want to be checking around for that. So in this game I go for fast factory, and then I take advantage of the fact that there is an expansion inside my main, and I just go ahead and expand right there. So Azz taking his second gas fairly early here, mining already a decent amount out of it, and here we see the robotics facility going down. So at this point I'm taking my second gas, I'm going to starport. I actually get supply stuck for a little longer than I would like, and basically at this point I know my expansion is almost certainly faster than his. I'm going to try and use my SCV to sneak into his main. It's going to be very hard for me to actually scout that position, but as long as because I took my expansion so quickly, as long as I don't die, I should be even at the very least. So this Stalker does end up intercepting my SCV, so I only see that he hasn't expanded in the front, so I can't really make any definitive conclusions there. So at this point I'm going to start making Banshees, and I have Marines at my front. The reason for making Banshees like this, honestly, I don't even know. I don't remember what was really going through my head here, but it does allow me, because we have these close air positions, a Banshee has a very short travel distance to get to this base if he's chosen to expand there. It also allows me to scout out his main fairly easily and just kind of see what's going on, apply a little bit of pressure. And now, just to be safe, because I don't actually know if he's expanded yet, I throw down a second bunker and I complete my wall with this factory. And this kind of gives me a bit of a buffer if he does go DTs, if he tries to run up my main, that kind of thing. So at this point I'm going to get a Raven, just to make sure I'm totally safe against our Templar. Also pretty safe against cheese in general. So we can see here he's actually going 5 warp gates with a warp prism. So the idea is to put the warp prism down in my base and just start warping in large numbers of units. So at this point, I'm going to start adding barracks. My second base has been up and running for a little bit of time, and here I have a Banshee in his main. And so this is the really critical point in the game. Because of the build that he's doing, he really has a large amount of incentive to continue warping units into my main. That's the only way he can be aggressive here. He only dropped 2 Stalkers. But by having this Banshee in his main, I forced him to actually to warp in Stalkers back into in defense. And so now, this one Banshee, which I'm going to keep alive because of its increased mobility, I can see the Stalkers warping in and I can dodge them. And now instead of having to deal with 3 Zealots and 4 Stalkers, I only have to deal with 3 Zealots and 2 Stalkers. And this makes a huge difference in me defending my base. At this point, I'm making a Viking so that I can repel the Warp Prism. And you can see one of his Warp Gates is still on cooldown from when from warping in a unit against my Banshee. And you can just see how much smaller his forces are right now. And now it's really important, if he does decide to move out with those units in his base, that I continue to apply pressure and force him to leave at least 2 Stalkers in his main. 1 Stalker, I can kill it with the Banshee, no big deal. The Banshee loses a decent amount of health, but I can still hold on. And now at this point, all I really have to do is hold on. I've scouted his build. I know he's going mass amount of Warp Gates, and the main important timing that he was trying to hit, with that Warp Prism, I ended up being able to skew because of my Banshee play in his main. And so it was a little coincidental that the timings happened to work out so nicely, but notice how when I saw the Warp Prism move into my main, I didn't bring my Banshee back to my own main. I continued to apply pressure and force him to spread out his forces. And part of the reason there is I know that if I just hold on, because I expanded so much faster than he did, I'll end up having an economic advantage and go into the mid-game ahead. So at this point, I ended up killing the Warp Prism with a Viking, and really all I need to do is clear out these units from my main, kind of divide and conquer, just take out the isolated parts of his army, and by doing that, we can take a look at the units lost tab. My army ends up being extremely efficient. I killed a decent number of probes with this Banshee, who is right there. 10 kills on the Banshee, most of them being probes. And so at this point, I'm really, really far ahead. And the reason for that is because I was able to force him to split some of his forces to defend an attack. And this is really the principle here is that when you're on the defense, if your opponent doesn't have quite enough units to actually break you, then they end up often becoming surrounded by SCVs, and they just get wiped out. And so he never quite got that critical mass of units where he could actually break my production line and stop me from mining resources. And so that kind of led to his attack being unsuccessful. And the reason for all that, as I mentioned already, is that I was forcing him to spread out his units to defend kind of a disproportionate number of units. He was forced to use a disproportionate number of units than he would like to defend his own main, and that took away from the critical mass that he was going for in his attack. So we can see at this point he's basically just trying to do whatever he can. His army's a little bit bigger than mine, or it was until he attacked, but because I just remained calm, kept my bunkers up, didn't let my guard down, played very safe. I knew I was ahead. All I had to do was survive. The attack doesn't do a whole lot. He GG's and the game is over. So this is QXC talking about the importance of splitting your opponent's army up when you're on the defense by being aggressive. Over and out.